Okay, so I just wanted to go through the the flower lesson. So I'm not going to go through the welcome. Well, I guess I will real quick. Just so you know, it's going to go through these various formats. You can come up with a hypothesis, collect data, analyze it, and explain your findings. That's the part of everyone. So we'll start off by making a goal, determine the independent variable, dependent variable, and we'll do that from pull-down menus. We'll actually conduct the experiment. We'll check our results. We'll do a bunch of different variations of the experiment. Um, then we will look at the data, we'll make a claim, and we'll choose those trials that actually support our data. And then we'll just explain what we have learned. So yes, I have read. Okay, so we're going through the flower intro. So in this lab, you will be observing the changes of a flower in the flower over a course of a week. You'll see how additives in the flower's water can impact petal redness and petal loss over time. To see how the flower can change, you will be able to manipulate red dye in the water, salt in the water, sugar in the water. So we'll be able to have three different independent variables. We can change any one of them, but we're going to do this based on what the problem and the purpose of the experiment is, which we'll go through in a moment. So the last thing you do is the actual determine how the red dye affects the redness of the. Okay, so what we're going to do is determine how the red dye in the water affects the redness of the petals. So if, and you're going to say either increase or decrease. So let's say we increase. And since our goal is to determine how the red dye affects the redness of the petals, we're going to say the red dye, if I increase the red dye in the water, and again, we're looking to see the effect of redness of the petals. So our independent variables, we're going to change the amount of red dye in the water. Our dependent variables, we'll be looking for the redness of the petals. And again, here's going to be your choice. It will either increase, decrease, or stay the same. I'm going to go ahead and say it stays the same for this one. I'm not going to take a position, but you're welcome to choose either increase or decrease. And then you go ahead. I'm ready to run the experiment. Now, we're going to determine how the red dye affects the water. So what we're going to do is right away we have none. We can change our settings. We have none, none, and none. So we have no dye in the water, no salt in the water, no sugar in the water. So if we want to test the dye, we would change the amount of dye in the water, and we would run the trial. And as we can see, as the amount of as the data changes, now when it's done, it will say, do we want to add this to our results? Yes, we do. So we see that we didn't add sugar, we didn't add salt, because that's what we're testing. We added red dye. We didn't care about how many petals it lost, but with the percentage of red, that's what we're looking for, and that's 100%. So we add these to our results. Now we can do another one and just see how it works. It may end up different, it may not. It's a simulation. Okay, so again, no sugar, no salt. We did add red dye, 6 petals, percent of red dye. We can add that to results. Now again, we have to have a control group, so we're going to do this with no red dye, and we're going to run the trial and see how that compares. And then we go ahead and add those results. Now, we've done 2 trials with the red dye, 2 trials without, but just for the sake of to being consistent, I'll run another trial without, so I don't need to. This is like a second control trial, but just to make sure my results are consistent. Now, uh, what I saw was no red. So when I'm done with the 3 trials, I have my table. How many trials did I do? Did I add sugar? Did I add salt? Did I add red dye? How many petals? And how many were red? So when you've done about 4 trials, we can say I'm finished collecting data. Now, what we noticed is we look at our trial, and our hypothesis, if I increase the red dye in the water, then the redness of the petals will stay the same. So what did we do? We increased the red dye in the water, and the redness of the petals then did what? What it did was it increased, because if the ones we used red dye in, they had red petal colored petals, so it would increase. This is not my now. I had no opinion, so it's kind of unrelated to my hypothesis. But if we had said that it would increase the redness, then it agreed or supports our hypothesis. If we said it wasn't going to change the color, then that would not support our hypothesis. Now, it also asks us for evidence, so I'm going to choose it's unrelated to. That shows it would not change. Um, these trials are evidence of my claim. So what I would do is I would choose the trials where I did red dye, and the more trials you choose, the better. And I'm done with my analysis. Okay, so now this part I'm not really going to worry too much about. So write a sentence that states what you found out about the scientific question you investigated. Provide enough details so a friend who did not experiment could learn from your description. I'll actually give you the answer. It's basically our hypothesis. If we increase the red dye in the water, we increase the redness of the petals. Okay? What evidence? Provide and describe the scientific evidence from our data table that supports our written claim. So if we have to look at our data, we can always show up here. We can see that when we added red dye, the red color was at a higher percentage. So we had to describe that. When we added red dye to the water, the percentage of redness of the petals increased. So that's what we saw. So as we added water to it, we saw that it increased. Explain why your evidence, what you chose, supports your claim, why you wrote in box one. So they're asking us, how did this data support what we said? And we can just, refer to the data. The chart shows that when red dye was added to the water, the petals increased their redness. And again, I'm fine with that. So if you want to use my answers, you can. This will be a video that you can always go back to, pause, rewind, or whatever you need to do. When I finish and submit, I am done. I've done all three parts of it. There's nothing else I need to do. So that is what I'm looking for you to do today. It's just to kind of review the scientific method. It'll be more of a completion grade than anything else, so please make sure you complete it. But otherwise, we'll kind of discuss the results we'll discuss the results at a later date. All right. If you have any questions, please always reach out to me. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.